Okay, kids, major is happy and minor is sad. We all know that. Whoopee, congratulations, you passed first grade. But how do we make chord progressions that are angry, that are aggressive, that are introspective, that are joyful, that are chill, that are atmospheric, that are romantic, that are smooth, that are these more specific emotions, not just happy and sad? We're gonna break this down in 3 simple steps, and I guarantee that nobody's ever taught it to you like this before, but you only get the maximum effect if you apply all of these 3 steps. So make sure you stay to the end. Let's get it. What's goody good, producers? If you are new to the channel, welcome. My name is BruceBeats. I'm a multi-instrumentalist and producer, credits with major TV film brands and major artists in the music industry. And my goal with this channel is to help you be a baller on the keys, specifically for your music productions, so that you can have the knowledge, the skills, and the confidence to express yourself and your emotions on this instrument for your producing, your songwriting, and your playing live and in real time. And this video is specifically talking about how we can do that through chords and through harmony. And again, we're gonna do that in 3 steps, and each of these are equally as important. So do not skip anything in this video. You'll miss out on the goods of this process if you're missing one of these ingredients. Step 1 is very simple. Know what the emotional quality of each chord is. Every single chord has an inherent emotional quality to it, right? Like if we just look at that stupid example of major being happy and minor being sad, it's very simplistic, but it's actually very accurate. Like this chord is happy by nature. This chord is darker by nature. Every single chord has a quality just like that. So what we want to do is we want to know what that inherent emotion is, so that when I'm going for that specific emotion, I can simply use those specific chords. Now there's 2 categories of chords that we can define here. We have consonant chords, which are chords that we could sit on and they just sound good by themselves. We don't really need to do anything. And then there are dissonant chords that have inherent tension to them, right? That bring us back to those consonant chords. So that dissonance and that consonance, another way of saying that is that tension and that release. And we want to understand what the release chords feel like and our dissonant chords, what those feel like. So for our consonant chords, we have our majors, our minors, and all the colors that are associated with that. So major 7, major 9, minor 11, all of that, along with our dissonant chords. And with our dissonant chords, we basically have 3 categories there. Our dominant chords and the different flavors that we can get out of that, our suspended chords, or sus for short, and our diminished chords. Each of these chords have a distinct flavor, and that's what we're going to discover right now. So let's start out with just our major triad. Now we know that this one is, we already know what this one is. This one's just kind of happy, but it's plain, it's vanilla, but it also feels very stable. So if I were to put an adjective to this, I would say stable and happy. Now, I would encourage you to put your own adjectives for what these feel like for you. There is going to be some overlap between what we feel, but you may describe it a little bit differently. You may get a slightly different visual. You may use a slightly different word that may be a synonym, but for whatever reason that word resonates with you more. Use that word and fill this in for your own self as I'm going through these voicings, because that's what's going to allow it to resonate with you and allow you to express yourself in the way you want to on the keys, because you've mapped your own adjectives to these chords. Now let's look at major 7. Oh, immediately, just like we go from to just with changing one note. You see the power of one note change? So this, for me, always just feels very romantic. This chord just feels, and it also has somewhat of a cloud-like feeling to it. I almost feel like I'm floating a little bit, like I'm lost and in love. Now let's take a look at major 9. So here's major 7. Let's add the 9. For me, this still has that romance vibe, but it just feels a little bit warmer. It feels a little fuller. So I'm gonna write warm romance because there's a slight difference in those 2. Our next chord is our major 7 sharp 11 chord. So we've added the major 7, we've added the 9, and now we add the sharp 11. And this right here, it's a very striking chord. It's very different than the other chords that we've played. And for me, it's like the angels are opening up the sky, man. It's like, oh, it just has this vibe to it, dude. What I see here is like a big cumulonimbus cloud with the sun behind it, and then the rays are coming out, and it's just like a divine presence. That's what this chord feels like for me. It's just super bright. So whenever I want that bright heavenly vibe, gonna use this chord. And last but not least, for major, I have the major 6/9. This chord right here. This is probably the least common of all of these, but we still hear it a lot. For me, this chord kind of sits between the major 9 and the major sharp 11. It feels warm, and it feels bright, but not as bright and heavenly. This chord for me is partly cloudy, and it's more on the side of cloudy. It's like 70% clouds, but I can still see the sunlight, right? So it's not as bright. So if I want the brightness, but I don't want it to be overly bright, this is my guy. So this is the difference between all of our major chords, and these are the adjectives I use. My major is just happy and stable. Major 7, I introduce some romance, it's kind of cloud-like. Major 9, it's still that same thing, just a little bit warmer. Major 7, sharp 11, bright and heavenly, divine. And 6/9, partly cloudy. Still bright, but we got some cloud cover. Now let's take a look at the minor camp. For me, this can be sad, but a lot of the times too, especially if I'm playing low notes or even, extreme high notes, it feels aggressive. So all of these kind of dark emotions, that's what this feels like for me. I don't like to think of minor as sad. I personally like to think of minor as dark, because under the umbrella of dark, you have all those different emotions. Now let's take a look at minor 7. If I have my regular minor chord here, and then I just add a 7, wow. What a change. It immediately just lightens it up. So for me, this minor chord just became a lot smoother and kind of feathery, kind of soft, almost like suede, like felt. It just immediately became softer and smoother. Now let's take a look at minor 9. Way different than minor 7, right? This for me has like an introspective vibe. There's some mystery. The minor 7 here is just soft and smooth, right? It's kind of sexy. But this, just adding the 9, just adding one note, changes the entire character. Minor 11. Woo, way different, right? We're kind of back into smooth territory here. Feels kind of dreamlike. I'm kind of getting clouds again, but they're a little grayer. So for me, this is dreamlike, it's smooth, it's sexy, but it's classy. These 4 here are 99% of the minor chords that you're going to use. There are 2 more that I want to show you that you may use them here and there, but I think I'd be doing you a disservice if we didn't talk about them. So let's talk about them. Number 1 is the minor 6/9 chord. So there's only one difference between minor 9 and minor 6/9. It's the 6. Again, the power of one note. These 2 chords feel completely different. Minor 9, kind of mysterious. This one is way more striking. It still has that mystery to it. But for me, this one has mystery, but it also has kind of a mafia vibe, like some sort of angst in here that's present that wasn't present in the other one. And last but not least, we have the minor major 7. This is like that spy thing, like, Austin, wait! It just has like that spy vibe, right? So again, these last 2, you're not going to use them that much. So you'll find maybe some moments here and there for these 2, but this is the majority of your minor chord vocabulary. So why is this important? Well, if I want to make something that's really dark and aggressive, I'm not going to use the minor 7 chord because it makes it smooth and soft. I'm going to just use straight up minor. Now, if I want to make something that's seductive, but it's not ratchet, right? It's kind of classy, then I'm going to use that minor 11. Because that's the chord that gives me that vibe. That's why thinking like this is perfect, because we're defining the emotion that we want to use. So there we go. We have all of our consonant sounds. We went over our majors, we went over our minors, and with all the colors. Now, let's hop over to the dissonant camp so we can define what these sound like. So the adjectives that you use may differ a lot more than the adjectives I use. Even though they still will be relatively similar, they might be a little bit more different because these tension chords, they may be a little bit difficult to distinguish if your ear isn't trained, because the difference from chord to chord is not insanely drastic, and they can sound just a little similar. But the more that you play around with it, and the more you try it, and the more you train your ear to listen for the difference between these chords, the easier it will become. So with that being said, let's dive into it. Dominant 7. So how do we get the dominant 7? First of all, well, if I play C major 7, and I take this 7 and I just flat it, that's a dominant 7 chord. So we notice that this chord right here just has some tension to it, right? So this, for me, how I describe this, is just vanilla tension. It feels like Bach and it feels like Beethoven because, right? It just feels very classical. So for me, that's just like classical vanilla tension. Next up, we have our dominant 9. So if I have my dominant 7 and then I add the 9 on top, this is a nice color. This dominant 9, it has the same. For me, adding this 9 has the same effect that it had on the major chord, but it feels a little bit warmer. So I'm just gonna add warmth to that for me. Next up, we have our dominant 7 flat 9. And this is where things get a little bit more spicy and interesting. So if I have my dominant 7, right, and then I find that 9th note, and I simply flat it. So I'll take this D and I'll bring it down to D flat. Ooh, sounds really cool, right? Now I have an interesting sound that I can bring back to my 1. So this, we can hear there's more crunch on this. So for me, this is a dark tension, crunchy tension. Dark and crunchy, like brownie brittle. Side note, if you love chocolate and you haven't gotten hip to brownie brittle yet, go to your grocery store right now and get some. Well, after this video. Another way to put it is like tension squared. Like we have this is tension. But when we add that flat 9, it's like tension squared. It's just a next level of tension. Next up, we have the altered dominant chord. And this is the shorthand way to write this. The actual way to write this chord is dominant 7, sharp 9, sharp 5. And that's really confusing for a lot of people. I'm gonna explain this real quick so you can understand it, but I never think about it like this. And I'm actually gonna show you how I think about it, but just to explain it so you can understand it. So I have my regular dominant 7 chord, right? I'm gonna find my 5, which is right here, and I'm gonna sharp it. So I'm gonna bring it up a half step. So now we have this sound. And then I'm also gonna find the 9, which is the same note that I was playing before. Now I'm also gonna sharp this one as well. So bring it up a half step. So we have this chord. And it just sounds really cool. Now, dominant 7, sharp 9, sharp 5, that's a lot. That's a lot of steps to get one chord. It's much simpler to say, hey, play this Lydian grip and put it over C. Boom. And then bring that over to F minor. Or bring that to F major. It's a much easier way to do it. And that comes from the grip system. I was taught this grip system when I was studying jazz at the University of Miami. And it just makes these tension chords and all of these colors a lot easier to execute on instead of thinking,
counting all the way up to the 9 and sharping, counting all the way up to the 11, counting all the way up to the 5 and flatting it.
We simply play our grip, put it over a single bass note, and then resolve it. And I have a whole entire free mini course on the grip system inside the Piano for Producers squad. All you need to do is click the link below and join the free group, and you'll have access to the free grips mini course. So, the altered chord. For me, this has always just registered in my mind as a soulful tension. For whatever reason, probably because I've heard it in a lot of soulful tracks, you know, it just has like a soulful tension vibe, and that's how I think about it. And our last dark tension chord, probably the darkest of them all, is our fully diminished 7 chord. I'm gonna change the key here to B, right? Like when I played it, man, that just sounds like, that is just dark. It's like you almost can't get any darker than that. Like I just shut off all the lights. And so this diminished chord just has all of this tension to either bring you to a major chord or to bring you to a minor chord. And so for me, diminished, it's just dark tension. But what is it for you? Go ahead and write that down for yourself. And last but not least, coming on the lighter side of the spectrum, everything we've done has gotten darker and darker and darker and darker. But what you can also do with tension chords is you can make them light, right? And we can have this light tension that brings us into our release. And so this sus13 chord is so beautiful. This for me is like the Earth, Wind, and Fire chord. It's the Barry White chord. It just has like a feathery tension to it that's like nice and soft and smooth. And again, instead of thinking,
what's the sus? What's the 13? What's the 9? All of this stuff.
Here's a really, really easy way to do it. Play an F major 7. Go ahead and put a G on the bottom of that. Look at what just happened to the chord symbol. You are now playing a G13 sus chord by just thinking F major 7. That is the power of the grip system. So if you want to get these smooth chords under your fingers without wrecking your brain over the theory, join the Piano for Producers squad and start going through the Grips free mini course. So there we have it. We have all our emotions for our consonant sounds, and we have all our emotions labeled for our dissonant sounds. Now, how in the heck do we use this to create emotions? That brings us perfectly into step 2. We've defined what these chords feel like. We have a greater sense of what the major 9 is, what the minor 11 is, what the dominant 7 flat 9 is. The more that you start to play around with these sounds and get dirty with it, like a kid in a playground, you can think less and let your intuition take over. So the best thing you could do is take chord progressions that already exist in songs that you like. See what happens when you add the 11 in there, when you add the 9 in there. If you take these dominant chords and you play them sus, or if you take these dominant chords and you play them dominant 7 flat 9. Don't try to mess with all the sounds. What I would highly recommend you do is I would pick your 1 or 2 favorite and start plugging that in everywhere. For example, let's say on the consonant side you really like that minor 9 vibe. Take some chord progressions that are already existing, just look up chord progressions for songs you know, and every minor chord, see what it sounds like when you play minor 9. That's going to start to give you a feel of where you can start to use this, where it sounds good, and also where it doesn't. And on the dissonant side of things, let's say you really like the sound of that sus 13 chord. Every single time you run into a dominant chord, see if you can make it a sus 13 and see what that does to the chord progression. How does that change the mood? How does that change the feel? And I just gave you the easy hack on how to make that chord. So in short, pick your favorite sounds and plug them into existing chord progressions and feel and experience how they change the vibe and how they change the emotion. Because the more you do that, the more you're going to start to get an intuitive sense of how to use these chords. And step 3, write music with an emotional prompt. Instead of going into your session and be like,
Yo, I just want to make something dope. I want to make something cool. I want to make a banger, dog.
give yourself an emotion to go for. And we kind of do this sometimes, but when you do it on purpose, you really learn a lot. And so what I would highly recommend you do is just get a piece of paper and write the word sad on it. Or write the word chill, angry, heavenly, divine. Whatever it is, write the word and put it on your studio desk right in front of you. That way, every decision you make in your track is filtered through making it divine or making it sad, angry, introspective, whatever it is. And what's really powerful of that list that we just made is not only does it give you the chords that are going to give you divine, heavenly, romantic vibes, it's also going to tell you what not to use. And that's what's really important. So if I want to make something divine and heavenly, I'm not going to use a minor triad. If I want to make something mean and aggressive, I'm not going to use a major 7. You see how this is starting to work? Because we named these adjectives, it filters out what we're not going to use and kind of already starts giving us the answers of the chords that we are going to use. And when you do this for 5 beats in a row, and you really focus on making that chord progression feel like that emotion, you start to develop a deeper relationship with the chords, and you start to gain go-to moves that you can use because you just know they will work. You're no longer guessing. If you've never done this before, it may take you a little bit longer to create your chord progression because you've never done this before. You've never tried to create to a specific prompt. So of course it's going to feel slightly different than it usually feels when you're writing, but you're training a skill. And if you do this for several beats in a row, that skill will be developed, and creating from a place of emotion will be easy. So let's quickly recap these 3 steps. Step number 1 is to label the emotions. If you haven't already done so with this video, go do that right now. Step number 2 is to experiment with existing chord progressions so that you're not trying to write something. You can just start getting a feel for where these chords work and pick your favorite ones and start plugging them in. And step number 3 is to write to an emotional prompt. I know it sounds silly, but literally write it out on a piece of paper and put that piece of paper in front of you. Because if you just think, I want to write a sad beat, once you start making it, you start getting lost in the weeds and you forget because maybe the idea is going to take you somewhere else. But if you write down the word sad in all caps and you put it right in front of you, you're constantly reminded, this is what I'm going for. And it forces you to stay in that box because it's just a reminder that's right there in front of your face. And this is really important. The whole goal here is for this to become the way that you think about chords. Whenever I play a major 7 chord, I actually don't think major 7. I think romantic. I think pretty, because that's what allows me, like if I want something pretty, like this is my pretty chord. That's how I think about it in my mind. If I want a tension that's striking, that flat 9 like is a striking tension and it's very dark and I know it's gonna give it to me. If I want a tension chord that's like smooth but feathery, I know that sus chord is gonna give it to me. And when I think about my musical history and writing music, and when it was difficult for me to express my emotions through music, and then when it started to become easy to express my emotions through music, I can boil it down to this change. But the only reason I'm able to do that is because I've taken the time to say, okay, this feels mysterious. And so this is not a minor 9 chord to me. I know it's a minor 9, but I don't think about it as a mathematician. 1 flat 3 5 flat 7 9. I don't think that. I think about it more in an artful way, because that's what allows me to use it in an artful way. So even though it sounds silly, even though it sounds elementary, it's incredibly powerful. If you're digging this content, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more. If you want to work with me more closely, check out the Piano for Producers Academy, link in the description. My name is Bruce Beats. See you next time.